Yo, what is up? This is Joshua Casper. Welcome to another Ableton Live video tutorial. This is on setting up your track to do a remix. This is not about making a remix, so I wanted to be clear about that right off the bat. But this is my process before I start doing anything for a remix. So the steps I take before I start manipulating, getting rid of, and adding my own stuff. There are certain things that I like to do to make sure everything's perfect when I start doing what I do. Thanks to remixcomps.com and Damn You Mongolians for helping me out by supplying me with some remix stems. Today is the 27th of March. The competition for the remix that I'm going to be preparing to make is open till the 8th. There's 12 days left, so if you want to follow along today and get a remix in, you can do that. If it's past that time, I'm not sure how long the remix stem link will be active on remixcomps.com, but you can always go check it out or download some other remix stems and follow along and just kind of use the methods that I will be showing you. But enough about that, let's get into Ableton. So here's my track that this is how I export for a remixer. I like all the tracks to be the same length, so there's no kind of confusion about what goes where and what not. So I just have some, some pads and some subs and vocals and stuff like that. And also on my remix pack, I will label it BPM, which is 112 for this particular project, and the key of the track. One thing that I've noticed what people do is they don't sync up their vocals perfectly. So if all of the stems are the same length, then it's fairly clear that this is where the vocals are supposed to be. But sometimes the vocals will be a little bit over, it could be just a little bit, and it could still be on time, but it's just odd. So it's very important to get things synced up. So I'm going to show you how to do that with a more complex remix pack. That's by the Damn You Mongolians. So let's go over to there and check that out. So this is what it will look like after I've set everything up. This is Damn You Mongolians track Before the Storm. As you can see, some of the tracks are full length and some of the tracks are just snippets. And that's okay because, if it's just this part right here and you export this entire part, this entire section for the full length of the track, it's still gonna be a huge file for just this little bit right here. So we don't need that. We're just gonna, they just exported this little section right here. So the first thing you need to do is get a copy of the original if you can. If not, then it's gonna be a lot more difficult, but luckily I have a copy of the original. And also find out the key of the track and the tempo of the track. And luckily enough, the tempo of this track is 140 BPMs. So I came in with the original here and I warped it out just like I would any other track. And then I made sure that it just came in perfectly right in the beginning here. So as you can see, I kind of messed up, so I just warp it, bring it over, boom. And if we listen now, so as you can hear, it's a pretty dope track, but let's get into these remix stems. So if I have the remix pack open in my browser here, let's see, Before the Storm, Before the Storm stems. These are what the remix pack looks like. Some of them are just clips, like I said, and some of them are the full length. So I would just start right off the bat by just bringing them in and syncing them up with the original. So I'm going to go ahead and turn all of these off except for my vocal. I got nothing in that track, so I can get rid of it. So I've got this original and the vocal. So let's just say that, whatever. This is how it opened up in Ableton. The first thing I would do is I'd turn the warp off and make sure my play cursor was completely over to the left. And then I would turn warp back on, and I have it set up in Ableton so it warps it automatically to the project BPM, which is 140, which is the correct BPM. And then I would listen to, say, this beginning part and see how closely the vocal is synced with the original. it's actually pretty close. So what I'd do is I'd come in and I'd zoom way in on the timeline down here, and I'd drag the play cursor over until I'd lined up these waveforms. So you can see there's a little hump right here, and the same with the vocal. So I'm guessing that's where the vocal comes in. And then I'd come in again and listen to see if it sounded right. So what I was doing there while this song was playing is I was turning the volumes up and down to see how close it was, and it's pretty close, so we're good to go. So now that the vocal's all set, at least in the beginning, I would come to the end to make sure it stays synced up all the way through, and as you can see, it's pretty close. We'll go ahead and listen again.
Storm is coming, oh, it's coming faster. Storm is coming, thunder, broken louder.
And there, it's a little off, so you can hear a little bit of phasing going on, but I think it's enough. And that's definitely close enough to have a remix going. I mean, obviously, if I was playing the original with the acapella over it for some reason, people would be able to tell, but I think it's close enough on time where people wouldn't notice it in the remix. But if we wanted to, we could come in and move it over just a tad. But anyway, now that the vocal's set up, let's check out something like this grunge bass part right here. And I've already done it, but let's just move it over and unwarp it and just kind of go through the process again. So again, the warp is off. I'd take it, I'd move my play cursor all the way over to the left, I'd turn warp back on, which warps it to the project BPM, and then I'd listen to the loop or the section to hear what part of the song it is. So it's the big bass hit, and I know that that's where this is here if I listen on the regular track. So it's the subby bassy stuff going on in the background behind those synths. So what I would do is I'd come in and I'd set it up close, and then I'd come in and again look at the waveform. It's all about looking at that waveform because the waveform will tell you where stuff goes. So here we go, and I can see it's a little bit off, so what I do is move it over, zoom in some more, and you see this where the wall kind of happens? I'm guessing that that's this. It's the same part right there. So if I zoom in more, it'll give me a more accurate kind of reading going on. And that looks pretty good. And if you look at the waveform now, you can see that this kind of goes up and down, it's dipping and it's coming up, and it's doing the same up here in the original. So if we come over to a different part, we can see that again it's pretty close. This section right here is looking pretty close to this section right here, so it should be pretty much on point. I'm always looking, I'm not even listening some of the time, I'm just looking at that waveform, and I can see that it's a little bit off, so I can come in and just kind of move it over. Should be good to go. So I'm going to zoom out now, and I'm going to listen to both together. And they sound pretty much the same. So that's pretty cool. And don't worry about redlining and stuff, because once we get rid of this original, it should be good to go. So now that that's done, there's a couple of things I want to do with this. First of all, it comes in a little before the actual hit, the actual drop of the drums. So what I would do is I actually zoom out, and I would highlight all of this here to make sure I got the end of it and the beginning, and I would right click and write consolidate, or click consolidate, or Control J. And now that that's consolidated it, I have it warped out at the right tempo, and I can also start moving this around without having to worry about whether or not it comes in at the right part if I wanted to use this particular piece for the remix. Okay, so now that this is highlighted, I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to make sure if I'm going to be using this at 140 BPM, I'm going to turn the warp mode to beats. And if I'm going to be using it at, say, 128 for some sort of electro complextro remix, I'm going to turn that to complex pro. So that way I can adjust the tempo of the project without completely destroying the audio file. And I would do that I do that same process for every piece. So here it's pretty much the same, so I just copy it here. But for this build up, as you can see, it comes off a little bit. I would do the same thing. I would highlight a bunch by a bar, I guess, and then I would just right click and consolidate. So now that that's consolidated, I would make it complex pro, and I'm good to start moving this around without having to worry about whether or not it's synced up on tempo. Other than that, I would just repeat that process for everything. And you know, again, here it starts. This is where the one drop comes in, and there's this empty space. And if I move this around now, that's already off tempo. So if I undo and then again consolidate, it's all about that consolidating to make the loops ready for manipulation inside of a track. Anyway, I hope that helped you guys. Starting your remix, but it's so important, especially on the vocals and stuff like that, the part that you're definitely going to be using in your own mix, to get that synced up and ready to start manipulating before you start manipulating, unless you're trying to go for a free flow feel or just using little pieces or whatnot. But that's how I would get this remix started. And if you look, if I kind of zoom out here, the Damn You Mongolians Before the Storm track, this is where I would start my remix. It would look like this, and now I would go to town. But anyway, I hope that helped. I hope that kind of gets you guys started doing the right stuff. Peace.